Hey, what is up guys, this is Norman3000. This content is a bit different as this is my first ever attempt to do a tier list. I have been playing a lot of Balatro over the past month, and I mean a lot. I bought the game on sale last November 25, 2024 and have since logged 225 hours and completed every deck on Gold Stake, so I feel like I have enough expertise to talk about this matter. I am ranking this based on how easy it is for a deck to get Gold Stake on the run. That being said, this is a tier list, so this is automatically wrong and I am dumb and have fun roasting me in the comments. I would actually love it if you do. A quick shout out to Mr. Alan Bercasio who saw us on Skyway yesterday. Safe travels to everyone going home. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. For the abandoned deck, you start with 40 cards and no face cards. Ride the Bus is extremely effective here and can easily carry you through the run. With a reduced deck size and consistency, this is one of the easier decks to get the Gold Stake. S tier. For the Anaglyph deck, you get a double tag every time you defeat a boss blind. There are a few things working against this deck. The first is it depends on your playstyle. The second one is the useful tags that appear are random. It makes it inconsistent, especially on higher stake runs. If you don't skip blinds, which you typically don't on higher stake, the tags will become useless. It is not uncommon to end a run with multiple double tags. However, when this hits, it hits hard and can become pretty clutch. For example, getting a negative tag with 5 double tags will essentially net you a free win, especially if you get an abstract joker. The inconsistencies and the fact that most tags aren't that great anyway, I would have to put this at C tier. Black deck is -1 hand and +1 joker. This is an extremely hard deck to complete, especially on Gold Stake. The -1 hand size really hampers you in the first 3 antes unless you get a really good joker on the first 2 antes. Even then, if you do get a scaling joker early, like Spare Trousers or Square Joker, the lack of hands can really make it hard to build up the values for those jokers, and the run can often end with you needing a few more points. Less hand size also means less money at the end of the rounds, which really amps up the difficulty. Initially, I really hated this deck, but I found it fun on some runs, especially if I do get riffraff on the first shop. The late game can get really tense and exciting with 7 jokers and 3 hands. You know this game isn't lovingly memed as Balatro, when you get negative tags and jokers but no grabber or nacho tongue. With all of this in mind, I am a rare black deck enjoyer and will happily place it on C tier rather than D tier. Blue deck is +1 hand every round. This is an easy A tier for me. The extra hand means extra money and more money is better help for your runs. Not really much to say here. I guess A tier is not a correct ranking for this one. Should this be S tier? I'm sure this is at the top of A tier, but I'm not sure if I should put this on S tier. I leave it at A and you can tell me down in the comments how unsmart I am. Checker deck starts with 26 spade and 26 hearts. This is an easy S tier for me. This is actually the first deck I got Gold Stake with. Initially, I actually thought flushes were the best hand to play, and me completing this on Gold Stake solidified my early beliefs. I also love getting the Smear Joker on my early hours of Balatro, so I really love this deck. Again, an S tier deck for this one. Erratic deck. All ranks and suits are randomized. This is actually the last deck I completed Gold Stake with. Not because it is the hardest, but because I actively avoided it as I thought it would be more challenging. It wasn't. It was actually more fun and bordering on the easy side. If you are just starting out, deck raiding might be too much, like how do I proceed with X number of cards on X number of suits. But after hundreds of hours where you know how to build depending on the deck, you can reasonably plan ahead with the erratic deck. An easy A tier too. Ghost deck gives you spectral cards and Hex at the start of the game. This is the third deck I achieved Gold Stake with. In addition to loving flushes in the early hours of playing Balatro, I had a bias towards polychrome jokers. I often resetted a lot to get polychrome tags to help me with runs, so getting a polychrome on a joker I selected is extremely useful. Polychrome spare trousers, polychrome ride the bus, polychrome square jokers, I love all of them. With my bias aside, this deck does actively help you as spectral cards like Emulate, Ankh, and Seal tags are genuinely helpful, but they do appear on shop, which limits good jokers that may appear. Ghost deck is my first B tier joker. Green deck earns no interest, but you gain $2 per remaining hand and $1 per remaining discard. This is one of the decks that I honestly struggled with. On higher difficulties, you start with -1 discard, and the required points is higher, innately needing more hands to play. If the early shops don't give you early game jokers, your economy will fumble, which will be detrimental to your run. Green deck sits at the bottom of the C tier. Magic deck starts with a crystal ball and 2 copies of the Fool. Magic deck is second to the last deck I completed Gold Stake with, and it's because I just found it so mid. The early game is where your hype part of the run is. This deck just doesn't stoke fun when I play. On black deck, you are constantly excited that your run might end. On checkered, you are always excited to play flushes. On abandoned, seeing Ride the Bus go up and up is exhilarating. Magic deck just doesn't provide me with anything. It's just a deck that has to be played. I have rarely gotten the Crystal Ball voucher on some runs, and waiting for a good tarot can take a while. In some situation, like getting Blackboard early, essentially 3 copies of the World or the Moon is great. Or getting 3 times Temperance or Hermit is great. Or the extra slot providing very useful for the Emperor or the Priestess. But these are all very situational. This deck just doesn't give you a clear direction, and I think that vagueness is really detrimental to playing this deck. Magic deck is my first D tier deck. Nebula deck starts with Telescope but -1 consumable slot. Contrary to Magic deck, I actually prefer Nebula deck, and I don't find the lack of consumable slot detrimental. Balatro lacks good chip generating jokers, so the Telescope alleviates that. This partners well with the Supernova Joker too. Supernova provides great multiplicative scaling, and Telescope provides you with the chips, albeit at a cost, a significant cost on higher stakes. The lack of consumable slots can get annoying, but this is also situational. Where Magic decks buffs the Emperor and the Priestess, Nebula debuffs them. In those tarots, just ignore them. The latter isn't really that good anyway. Personally, I like the Nebula deck, but it can get very expensive and economy is harder to build on higher stakes. So this is a C tier for me. Okay, so we are now at Painted deck. Painted deck gives you +2 hand size and -1 joker. This is like an inverted black deck, but +2 hand size isn't really as great as 1 hand. This is the third to the last deck that I got Gold Stake with. And it is because I found the -1 joker extremely detrimental, especially on late game. You typically win Balatro when you let the jokers play the game, and the lack of jokers here means the lack of wins. You don't always get a negative tag or a negative joker, and a negative joker is random and very expensive. The +2 hand size is great for the early game as it can help you get flushes, but flushes stale very poorly. And typically on higher stakes and antes, a pair or a high card are the best plays. Hand size doesn't really matter. I guess it does when you're playing at most 2 pairs. It doesn't help that finisher boss blinds really kick your behind. Your joker arrangement is crucial. Ambercorn, haha, you. You think 4 jokers is hard? Verdant Leaf and Crimson Heart will be like, well, how about 3? Are you playing flushes? Cerulean Bell will be like, use this spade card along with all your other clubs. And for the Violet Vessel, I see you made it to 300k. How about 1.2 billion? I really hate playing this deck on higher stakes. I'm sorry for Painted deck enjoyers here, but this is a D tier for me. Plasma deck averages chips and molt before scoring. This is a different spin on the game itself. This taught me the importance of scaling. On this deck, it is extremely important that you get both a chip scaling and a molt scaling joker. This is where I learned to love spare trousers and the square joker. This deck is just right. It provides the perfect balance, pun definitely intended, of difficulty and fun. While this deck is important to my growth as a Balatro player, this is not top tier for me. It's Balatro, but it's not, if you get what I'm trying to say. Nonetheless, this is an A tier deck for me. Red deck gives you +1 discard every round. Similar to the painted deck, +1 discard is very useful in the early game, but it tends to fall off late unless you have specific jokers that goes great with discarding, like Yorick. In addition to Yorick, some jokers do benefit from the added discard, which makes it better. Banner and Castle gives you chips, and the latter can scale to the late game. Mail-in rebate, delayed gratification, and faceless joker essentially gives you more money for better economy. Trading card gives you deck thinning, and Burt Joker gives you an upgrade to your hand. Celestial packs are expensive and unreliable on higher stakes, so personally I found the discard versatile enough to help with the run, so I'm confident in placing it in the B tier. Yellow deck gives $10 at the start. This may not sound like much, but on higher stakes, it actually is. This is the second deck I completed Gold Stake with. The ability to buy more jokers early provides more opportunity for scaling. If you get a good early game joker, your rounds will end faster, more interest, more money. Yellow deck safely rules at the top of the B tier. And now we have the Zodiac deck. You start the run with Tarot and Planet Merchant and Overstock. While Overstock is a good voucher, the other two are god-awful. You have to dedicate some money for rerolls due to the underwhelming shop options 90% of the time. Of course, 90% isn't really scientific, but playing this deck, it just feels like it. Unless you have a fortune teller, the Excel Tarots aren't really that worth it, and the planet cards may be worth it if you have both Astronomer and Constellation. This deck actively hurts your run, and I have no problem rating it in the D tier. And that's been it, guys. What do you think of this awful tier list? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Consider like, sharing, and subscribing if you found this useful. This has been Norman 3000. See you soon, stay safe, and Happy New Year!